Good evening. Welcome to our January 27th work session. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, it's nice to have everybody join us tonight, or this evening, and certainly I want to commend our community and our school organizers, especially our superintendent, Barbary, who, on behalf of 8 students who encountered a terrible apartment fire on Friday night, that there was a lot of good work done to provide them with food and clothing over the weekend. So thank you to everybody, and just the outpouring from the community was overwhelming. It makes you so happy to live in this place. Anyway, with that, since it's a work session, I'll turn it over to Joe, and we have everything on the agenda to review. It's all yours, Joe.
All right, perfect. So we're going to begin with the 25-26 budget update. What we're going to focus on this evening is to give you an overview of where we stand on the revenue side of the budget. If you recall back in December, our first work session, we talked about our expenditures, our anticipated expenditures. We have an update with that area of the budget, and then we have our school aid runs based on the governor's budget. So we'll get the presentation up here. And we'll move right to this graphic here where we have this has not changed on this slide. So when we had the presentation back in December, we were in total just over $144 million being proposed for the 25-26 school year. And so we left this slide here. Obviously, as we move forward, we will update this. But we wanted to show you this is where we were back in December. Since that time, we have made approximately, we reduced the budget $1.5 million, which brings us to a budget proposal right now of just over $142.5 million. So we're looking at a slight increase. And we'll talk more about that in a few moments. So some of the changes that we've made since our work session, they are on the screen there, but I would like to highlight a few that we did provide under the executive content portion of the budget. So we were able to, we made a reduction, we reduced the executive's budget by about $300,000 for transportation aid. We typically always make adjustments to transportation aid from what the governor puts out there because of the fact that we have fund balance in that budget, and they base their proposal on the fund balance, and we're not obviously generating aid on fund balance because the hope is that we don't have to use it. It's just for that emergency situation. But areas where we've reduced from our proposal in December, we had a reduction in equipment. We wanted to try to close that budget gap that we knew that we were going to have. So typically at the elementary level, we're purchasing 2 full classrooms worth of furniture. We reduced that down to 1 for next year. And the hope is we continue to move forward with all of our capital projects. Plus, we don't want it in the way as we're doing renovations. The goal would be to purchase some of those tables and chairs and other equipment in the projects that have been approved by voters. We also reduced the scope of equipment purchases for the dirty weight room. Those will be now part of this current year's budget with some equipment money that we have remaining, and then also equipment being pulled out of the dirty project. We reduced fund balance in the insurance and other benefits area, thanks to the work of Tiffany and staff in the business office and some of the projections that we've had coming forward from our consultants. We reduced Baker equipment by approximately $20,000. That is included, will be able to be purchased out of this year's budget with some remaining balances that they have there in their line items. We reduced fund balance for bus drivers and a couple of extra positions there, and as you know, it's a struggle to find drivers, so our goal is to just maintain the number that we currently have in this current 24-25 budget. And then last but not least, we made some reductions in the administrative salaries, and this all has to do with the succession planning that we discussed based on some personnel in executive session. And so as we get closer and the board adopts the budget, we can highlight some of those major changes. So overall, we are in a good place with our projected 25-26 proposal. We have approximately $300,000 built into our fund balance, which is typical from year to year. We see right now a budget-to-budget increase of 5.57%, down obviously from what we had before. Now, what I think is important to point out here, because obviously we don't want to continue to have budget increase, budget-to-budget in that range, right? Our goal is more closely aligned to whatever the CPI is. What I think is important to point out is because we have all of these projects that were previously approved by voters, we're taking on additional debt in the 25-26 budget, so our debt service is increasing. And if we were to remove the debt service from what you see here, we actually see a general operating fund budget only increasing at 3.63% compared to the current year. So that's more in line where we want to be. But what's also interesting with that increase in the debt service, so obviously taking on more debt, but that on the revenue side, you're going to see our revenue associated with that is also increasing. So there's a corresponding balance between the two. So it's not impacting our taxpayers. We're getting that aid back on our debt because of our capital projects. So I think overall, the cabinet is pleased with where we stand with the governor's runs. Traditionally, the governor's runs are always worse off than the legislative runs. So if things are maintained with foundation aid as proposed, we're in a good place. So that really highlights the reductions that have gotten us to that $142 million proposal, 142.15, that we are at right now. Are there questions about the reductions before I go to the vote?
So the revenue, you'll see an offset in the revenue for the larger increase, yeah?
Yes, we'll
Yes.
slide to that part of the presentation in just a second if there are no other questions. Okay, so if you look at the state aid run, so Tiffany and former assistant superintendents for management services always provide an analysis of what we budgeted, what the governor's run will bring, and then once we have the legislative run, we'll add that to this so that it's very clear for our general public. So you can see the analysis. The governor's run is increasing our foundation aid by approximately $1.5-ish million, close to that, at $42,318,000. Our BOCES aid calculation is up. We're spending more with BOCES, so it's great to generate that additional aid. Our high cost is pretty consistent to the 24-25 budget. You'll see where we have the increase. So the governor's run, as I mentioned before, with transportation was having us come out at just about $8.2 million. That's where Tiffany is backed off about $300,000 because of the fund balance that we budget. So that's a conservative approach, and if we're spending more in transportation between now and the end of the school year, that'll obviously get adjusted and reflected more closely in line with what the governor's runs indicate. You'll see as we scroll down to building aid, you'll see the governor's run has us projected at $5.528 million, and we know that there's going to be that corresponding $2+ million increase. We've worked with fiscal advisors. We have reports that are being submitted to SED, and so we know we're going to get that additional aid. So that corresponds with that oncoming debt. So you'll see overall, subtotal general fund aid coming into us, up from the prior year, what was budgeted, $65.8 million through general fund aid. You'll see some additional aid for universal pre-K, and our grand total here is $67.763 million. If we look at other revenue sources, as we're balancing our proposed spending plan, you'll see this is an estimated at where we stand with payment in lieu of taxes for a few of our pilots. Everything else is pretty much staying consistent to what we budgeted in prior years.
Yeah, I just try to understand this. I've always viewed the pilots as a negative thing, right? They don't pay the direct tax, they pay a pilot agreement instead. But here, we are getting money because we're probably not getting the full amount we should get, we're getting something less, is that what that is showing? Okay, just wanted to understand that, okay, thank you.
So that would be part of what I guess it's the known of what we have given the
Yes.
agreement. So we've had a few pilots come on, and I will point out one of our largest pilots, the Anheuser-Busch. This is the last year of that pilot, and we'll see based on 26, 27, I'm sorry, I'll do one more after this, but as far as the proposal, it's, we'll have to work with our legislature, or our government officials to figure that out.
Just a quick question. So the revenue from pilots is increasing. Is there like another project or couple of projects that came on over the course of the last year, or is that just a difference in the existing pilots that affect us?
So they're based on the schedules that have been negotiated, and some of them do increase year to year.
Any other questions on the other revenues?
How many pilots do we have? I mean, just the number.
Yeah.
10.
Thank you.
We were prepared for that. So when you take a look at our overall, where we stand, we are looking at appropriating from our fund balance $2.6 million to help offset the proposed spending plan. It is up slightly, but as we look historically, we basically appropriated fund balance around that $2.6 million range. Last year, we were able to drop it down because the board adopted the budget, and then we received some additional aid when the legislative runs came through, so we just reduced and backed down fund balance, because we weren't gonna change that bottom line.
However, the state likes you to be using some of your fund balance along, right?
Correct.
If you can replenish it, that's okay, but you really need to, if you're gonna have those balances, you need to be using some of them,
Yeah.
or you'll get hit on that.
And you'll see that when we're appropriating use of the ERS reserves at $1.7 million.
Gotcha.
And then use of the workman's comp reserves at $160,000. So overall, you'll see the total estimated revenues of just over $142.5 million to set our expenses. You'll see down at the bottom at this point, based on what we're projecting, we don't see a need for any additional cuts or reductions. So that's where we stand with our current budget proposal. I will point out it maintains all positions and instructional opportunities that we have for students, after school, enrichment, extracurricular, you name it, across the board. So I think we're in a good place. Any questions on the budget? And then what I would say at this point is we shift to our second item for discussion. Do you want me to go through that?
Yeah.
I can.
I think it
Yeah,
should be
yeah,
good.
go back.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. We will have this available, sorry.
I just think it's a.
No, it's a good use to point out, you're absolutely correct. So I neglected to show another update to our slides. We did put forth the estimated tax rate per thousand. So as you can see historically, over the last several years, remember, we're estimating the tax cap. And And then once the board adopts the warrants in August, we have the actual rates. So as you look at this graphic, you'll see the rate, tax rate per 1,000. It's obviously decreased over the last several years. When you look at our estimated tax rate and what is actual, you'll see a negative representation over the last several years. And so I think it shows that we do our best to try to be fiscally responsive to our taxpayers and curb spending and keep things reasonable for all of our stakeholders.
Just to elaborate on that, what you're doing, you're using your current tax projection against last year's tax base, because until, is it July 1? August 1? July.
It's up. We get them in August. But
Yeah, you don't know what your new tax base is until July. So you put it against your old one, and invariably, you get some growth in your tax base. So for instance, if we said we're gonna do a 4% growth, but the tax base grows at 1%, then the true growth in taxes is only 3%, right? In this case, the growth tax base grew more than our budget increase. So we're going down, 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 which is good news.
And when you think about the last 2 years, unless your home had an addition or other major property enhancements, the town of Van Buren and the town of Lysander did not reassess over the last 2 years. And if I remember correctly, the additional tax base, it was around $44 to $49 million over the last 2 years where we've grown based on new construction and those adjustments.
Yeah, so just one, recasting the wording a little bit, the verbiage. So 9 months ago, when we were talking to voters about this, we were talking about 3.9%, and folks were kind of going, and it's, okay, not great, but, it's not 4, which was kind of the magic number. And in actuality, if we had the crystal ball, and we could have seen to today, what we could have been telling them is that proportionally this is a decrease in budget as a percentage of assessed value, the way it's calculated on assessed value. In other words, the proportion of levy in relation to assessed value is actually decreasing by, you could say, the highest rate in 7 years. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm understanding that.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to misrepresent it.
And what I would also point out, until the board adopts the budget, we are at this point gonna recommend or propose to you that we adopt at the first meeting in March, which is typical of what we've done the last several years. We don't see our bottom line changing. And we do have, as far as the tax cap calculation, we are anticipating potentially a few slight changes. Those do not have to be finalized until the end of February. So we're projecting a 2.98%. That's an estimate, and that will likely change once those are finalized. But when the board adopts the budget at the first meeting in March, we will have that estimated finalized tax cap calculation.
So if I may, the other piece here is that people complain their tax bills are going up. They're not going up because of the rate. They're going up because of being reassessed, home improvements, or there could be water district increases, there could be sewer districts are on there, because there's other things on that tax bill that besides just your school taxes, so.
And I believe the other piece, and I'm looking at Tiffany, is if they adjust the equalization rate, that could potentially impact how that is seen on the tax bill with our homeowners. And we don't have control over that as a school district. That is each of the taxing entities, the towns, have control over that. The positive piece, I do know that the equalization rate was the same for at least 2 of our 3 towns last year, which was consistent. Right. Good question.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll get to our next item that we had on the topic for discussion is our continuation of the property tax exemptions and limits. We had a great presentation in our last work session from Don Weber from Onondaga County, and we just wanted to continue that conversation to get a sense of what's the board sentiments regarding the tax cap, the options that are available. As we mentioned the last time, we have until, if we were going to make an adjustment, we'd have to make an adjustment and get that to be counted by March 1st. So our window is certainly shrinking. And we also, it would be something that would require an action item. So if changes were to be made, what we've seen from other districts that have made adjustments is they've held a public hearing to get additional feedback from community members. That does not have to necessarily be tied to a board meeting, but that would be part of the process before any action, at least that would be the recommendation, before any action would be taken by the board if changes were to be made.
Joe, what other school districts have adopted the maximum or maybe a sliding scale?
So I'm gonna look at Tiffany. I know recently, the most recent district was Liverpool. I believe they held a public hearing. Not 100% sure if they voted on that yet or it's on the docket for adjustments. West Genesee, Lafayette are a few. Don had a couple more listed in the presentation. I believe North Syracuse has made adjustments to the scale over time.
Westville recently.
Westville. So there's a variety who have at least made adjustments to the senior and disability exemptions. West Genesee and Lafayette were the only ones that pretty much offered all of the exemptions. I do believe from what I saw, Liverpool in their public hearing, they were looking at potentially all. But again, I haven't seen the final resolution on their work.
I just wanted to say something because for most of my career, I've worked with senior citizens. So I just want to share that when you're making, $50,000 or even the top rate of $57,500, it's not a lot of money to live on. And as you are getting older and you need more assistance to remain in your home, which is what most seniors want to do, and when we're all of that age, I think we're going to want to do. You need some help with things. You may need help with grocery shopping, cleaning your house, taking a shower, those kinds of things. None of that is covered by insurance. None of it. It is all paid for privately by seniors. So when seniors say, I'm struggling to stay in my home, that's why. Okay, because in order to remain independent and stay in your home, you have to pay out of your pocket. So if you're making $50,000, if your income is $50,000 a year, and you're trying to pay for your home and your groceries and the necessities of life, and pay your insurance premiums and things like that, and then also pay for those other things, it's a real struggle. So just wanted to share that information with my fellow board members, if that helps you think about this decision at all.
I feel like you do, because the other exemptions, while it would be wonderful to be able to do something for veterans and first responders, we can't quantify what that means. And you understand, we're not losing any money, but what we are is shifting this money, this burden to somebody else. The senior ones, the income does carry a lot of appeal to me because, number one, we can quantify it. We know exactly what it is. The one question I have is, it's a big, that whole thing would be a big jump in 1 year. So I wonder if it might be a couple of year step or something like that. But I certainly think that is due additional consideration, just my opinion.
I have to agree with Vic and Christie as well, but more so on a sliding scale. I think if we were to impact our community in 1 year, it would be a hardship on everybody. So we need to spread that out a little bit.
I just wanna understand this right. So we have, we can, choose any percent of the exemption and move forward with that, or is that we have to do the 50%?
You got the.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm looking at my, other screen, I forgot I'm working on
If I
this
read it
as
right,
well.
sorry.
There you go. Slide, so, some board members have mentioned, there is the ability to phase this in, and you can say, what income limit. So where we're at currently, with the exemption at 50%, is the maximum income of, $29,000. You can determine thresholds up to the max of 50. So the board does have the ability to do that. If you choose to do that, we would have to, work with obviously council and the county to establish a resolution and what that would be. My understanding is, right, Tiffany, that we are the only, at least in the town of Clay, Van Buren, and Lysander, but really Clay's the big one. We're the only district that is comprised with, at least the town of Clay, that has a difference in these income limits compared to the other districts. So from a perspective of the town of Clay, they'd like to see some consistency. When we spoke to the assessor, that was something that did come up.
And there was a recommendation that the guy who presented this to us last
Yep.
time. There was a recommendation he made for us to be more consistent. Do you remember? It had to do with the disability, maybe.
If you take a look here, you gave us some examples. So the recommendation from what I recall in that meeting was that if you're going to make adjustments with the senior exemption, that it made sense to do the disability exemption as well. They pretty much go hand in hand from the county's perspective, and that's where you start getting discrepancies and people assume because the county has adopted, if I remember the conversation correctly, both. So where it's not consistent and people get confused, they think they're getting both and they're not, depending on which tax bill they receive. So his recommendation was that if you're going to make adjustments to, for us, the impact is 39 total disability exemptions, so it's not significant in total when you look at all of the properties.
Do we know what the senior percentage or reduction that the other districts for the town of Clay are currently using? Because if I remember what he said, no one was at the maximum. Most districts are somewhere in between. But do we know what, using Clay as the example, just to try to dig out consistency, what there is, or is that something?
We can definitely find out. I can try to scan my email to see while we're continuing the conversation. I just don't recall if the town of Clay, when he sent me the information, if he provided me with that. But I'll try to do that simultaneously with when others are responding, providing their feedback.
Okay, yeah, because obviously if we are gonna consider senior separate from the other two, and we were said, yeah, we should probably do something, I don't wanna just have to pull a number out of a hat, you know what I mean? And kind of look at what's being done in the county, but specifically what's being done right here with our neighbors, so I think that might be helpful if we were gonna consider something, at least a starting point or an ending point, if that makes sense.
do see that North Syracuse, he gave you some information here, did recently raise their limit to $47,399. So that was that's again the town of Clay, and I don't believe Liverpool's made it to the point where they voted on it. I know they had a public hearing. We can get that information. So we certainly can provide the board with all of that in a Friday letter. Now that we know, at least that you're asking those questions.
So, I see the board shifting toward this, sliding scale, but ultimately that's a yes, we should do it. And honestly, I'm still having trouble with that. I don't know how we rationalize or justify choosing one group out of this list. And I also don't understand how we rationalize choosing seniors. There are lots and lots of people who earn these salaries and less who are not old in our district. And so I don't know what I'm gonna say to them when I'm going door to door. They're gonna ask how their elderly neighbor got this tax cut, and they're bringing home, their income is $45,000, and I'm talking to a guy or a gal who's making $40,000 and has a child or two at home. They don't get an exemption of any sort. So I'm not entirely sure that this makes any sense, particularly from the perspective of, again, we're a school board. We're an independent taxing authority, but our taxing authority is limited to education. And this, to me, whether it's the seniors or the veterans or the firefighters or, I don't know, you pick a group, any group. Everybody's got a favorite group. I've got a favorite group. It happens with veterans. But I'm having a hard time understanding how choosing particular groups to remove a tax burden from and then lay that burden on other groups who are not my favorite. I can't reconcile that. I don't know how I answer the folks who have those questions. Why is it fair that these folks did this or are in that condition, and I may be suffering very, very similar circumstances, or maybe even very dissimilar circumstances, but financially I'm still in the same spot. I'm not sure how we justify that when our charge, our legal charge, is a tax levy for education. We don't have the power, we don't have the authority to pass legislation for senior care or veterans care or firefighter. We don't run a fire district, none of that stuff. We have absolutely no authority. And so when we make a commitment like this, we're gonna do whatever percentage based on whatever income, we actually, and I agree with Vic, for the seniors thing is quantifiable, but I also would argue not really, because we don't control what other relevant tax laws are gonna be related to seniors. We have no idea what's gonna happen with the state level. At the town level, kind of all these other taxing jurisdictions can impact a senior's income and the way that they spend their money, or the way they don't spend their money. We can't control what those other taxing authorities do, right? We don't have any authority, but we're gonna tie the way our levy is distributed to age or veteran status or service in a fire or police department or whatever the favorite is. That, to me, I'm not sure that that's responsible, because it's not controllable by us. If we were in the business of having some say, exercising some authority in what happens with senior income, with veteran income, with firefighter income, I would say, okay, that's something that we can manage to go forward. To me, we're getting tied here, and we're trusting in, all of you know me, this is the last thing I will ever do, trusting other government agencies to do the right thing from a school district perspective, right? Because that's really what has to happen. In order for this to work well for us, other governing authorities, other taxing authorities have to think about the ramifications of their decisions with us in mind. And I'm not sure that's gonna happen.
So I appreciate that, Don, I do. I think, first, what I'd like to say is that this is something that has been available to seniors. It's just that we're increasing the, income level that can qualify, for it because it hasn't increased in a number of years. Second, it's not being offered to other, folks based on income, but we levy taxes for school districts based on the value of your home. So if you're a senior, you've been in your home for a number of years, and you were working at one point and earning a particular income, once you stop working, your income drops off significantly. And as I said, your needs may increase. And so I don't know that that was the rationale for giving this to begin with. I'm just sharing that that's kind of the practicality of what happens to seniors. And if there was another one offered based on income, I would probably be advocating, we look at that one, but it's not. It's just this one is being offered, it has been offered, and what we're being asked to do is just put the income limits in line with a more realistic slate based on the fact that it hasn't been looked at in a number of years.
I have a question on that, actually. It made me think, when you're talking about income and seniors, I think I remember reading there was two different ways to do this. One had to do with pulling from like IRAs and retirement funds and things. So when we talk about income, is that up to us which way this is done, or is this up to the county? Because the one thing I found troubling is if we were going to shift burden to other taxpayers, because Social Security benefits stink, but I have a really hefty IRA and I'm pulling that off, so I'm making more money than anybody because I invested really well in my retirement. To give them a tax break and not, for me, I look at income as income for all the reasons you said, but I guess my question is that something that we have to adopt, or is that up to a different entity? Because I remember reading.
It's on slide 6. Onondaga County has exercised the option to include distributions from IRA. I believe that's what that says. Because you're right, if you're getting, your income from Social Security, you could be below the 50,000, but if you're drawing from an IRA, that could put you over the cap.
Yeah.
That would put you over the cap. So we'd have to decide, are we gonna consider also the IRA?
Yeah, well, that just
withdrawals.
made me think of that, because as we try to decide where we wanna go, what we wanna do, if we wanna do it, I think for me that's really important, because I've taken care of a lot of folks that have been retired that don't have the income. Activities of daily living is a real thing, and it is quantifiable. It is how you define independence. It's how folks stay in their house without being forced into a Medicare, Medicaid type assistance. So, but I think this piece right here on slide 6 is also important, because I struggle shifting burden to people who are working from someone who made really good choices in life and doesn't necessarily need that break.
So that raises a question for me. Slide 6, the last line there says, an owner who has no income other than Social Security that draws $100,000 a year in IRA distributions would qualify for the exemptions.
Yeah.
We can make that.
You-
We
you-
can
right.
make that
No,
determination.
No, it says if you don't choose that.
If you don't,
So
yeah.
my assumption
Understood, okay.
is that the total income our local, include IRA, local, towns, thank you.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think all, the assumption we made, but that is a very good point, that we do need to consider that, thank you.
And is that something that, would we be doing the accounting?
No, no.
Okay.
No.
They have to provide, everything goes through the county, they have to provide, they have to apply every year. They're responsible for that, we don't do anything.
Okay, so no administrative costs?
No administrative
Okay.
costs for us.
So, any other thoughts or new points to bring up on this, or I guess we'll talk about this at future meeting, is that right?
We have the roundtable again at the next board meeting, well, next Monday. So that'll be here before we know it.
So yeah, maybe if we can find out what Liverpool did.
Yeah.
Yes, I will make sure that we work to put all that information in your Friday letter, this Friday, so that you have it, and we'll get a sense. I believe every agency is, taken the recommendation and included all income, but we will verify that, at least for our surrounding, neighbor schools.
I do have one thing with the first responder. One, I did a little research on that too. If you scroll down to that, I think the example they gave was if we adopted this for the first responders based on, I don't remember, if it's $100,000 home or $250,000 home, what the savings would be. It was something quite small. I remember like $50 on it. It was one of the things that Don gave us in the presentation.
20.
Not slide 21. Yeah, that's perfect. So, yeah, so you're looking at $50 school tax savings per volunteer based on, and I think the house he said was, he was giving an example of $250,000 assessed home. And I say that because for first responders, and it made me think of that gentleman from Belgium Springs that came and thought it'd be a great recruiting tool, but the New York State offers a $200 tax credit, which when I was a volunteer paramedic, I also claimed. I no longer do because I'm not volunteering currently, but that $200 annual credit from the state is one or the other. And not that anyone would ever accidentally apply for both, but it's one or the other from what I researched from Onondaga tax, from what I understand. So if that's the case, they're going to benefit much higher unless they live in $1 million home, which I also don't think we should burden our taxpayers with those that are doing very well. My personal opinion is I feel the volunteers would have a better benefit getting that $200 tax or state credit instead of saving $50 a year on a school tax. So that's just my, again, personal opinion and looking into it. And if I was a volunteer ambulance worker or firefighter, that's what I would do, and that's what I would also encourage all of my colleagues that are also volunteering to do as well. I don't see a benefit with us or giving other taxpayers a higher burden for something when the state actually offers them a better deal, if that makes sense. So, and from what I read, I could be wrong, it was one or the other. So I think with this one, it might help sway a decision so that we can maybe focus on the other groups, if that makes sense.
I think that's a great piece of information for us to have, for when anyone asks.
Yeah.
You know, we recognize that the state gives you 200, if you take, 200 is always better than 50, so, there's really no reason for us to do, if it is either or, I mean, that's a great piece of information for us to have for our first responders when they ask what they do.
Can you, our taxpayers really be able to choose one option? They couldn't maybe get the senior and the veteran, you could only do one exemption? Is that true?
Oh, yeah, they don't impact each other. They could have both exemptions if they qualify.
It's not fair to a retired veteran.
And of course, Don pointed out that some veterans may be eligible for the senior low income also, so that possibly covering some of that. Okay. Other information, Joe?
Just, yeah, other information I neglected when we were talking about the budget, and I know, so I'll keep this really quick. We can have a final discussion at the roundtable of the next meeting. What our recommendation is, when you think about we have a budget proposition that will be made, or March, first meeting in March, you'll adopt. Along that, we'll have the seeker for the $100,000 project that is anticipated being at Baker High School. We would be proposing, given the fact we're going to be utilizing our reserves, our capital reserves, we'd like to see a proposition to create a new capital reserve. So if we have additional funding at the end of the school year, we have the ability to move that into the capital reserve. So that would be another proposition. And then we'll have our school bus proposition. I know in our previous slides, we had the electric bus still floating out there. At this point in time, we didn't see any change in the governor's proposal with electric school buses. I don't know that it would be the wisest thing to proceed forward. My understanding is that the change in the federal government is that there was some changes made at the federal level. We've heard nothing from the state, actually federal level pulling away some of those resources. So I don't see us getting any additional money to reduce the cost. We've heard from our community from a 2-to-1 perspective. It's not necessary yet to go into play. So I don't know that that's needed. So think about that, and we can finalize those propositions at the roundtable on February 3rd.
Okay, so that wraps up the items we had listed. Any last comments or thoughts? Okay, Harry, go ahead.
I wasn't at the last board meeting, but I wanted to compliment the board, the cabinet, on your discussion, your professionalism, your respect for one another. It really shows. And I think we're in a really good place. But I wanted you to know that I listened to it, and that dialogue to me was one of the best dialogues we've had as a board. And you guys showed a lot of class.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Okay, so hearing no further discussion, our January 27th work session will be adjourned, and we do have a board retreat for self-evaluation following. So thank you, everyone.